Here's the thing though. I might be uncomfortable at some point during this because my son threw my back out. I'm officially old. I had my first back thrown out.
Did you really?
On Monday. It's the worst pain I've ever felt in my life.
Oh.
He was at mom and dad's. He's sleeping. He fell asleep at like 6:00.
Yeah.
Which isn't like him. So he fell asleep sleeping. So I went to pick him up to take him to the car to go home. And he didn't realize where he was at. So he fought me to go back down to like go back on the couch. So I caught him, but my body was like this, you know? So when he did that and he pulled on me, it pulled my lower back and I just fell on the ground. I feel like I lost feeling in my leg. For like 5 minutes, I couldn't feel my leg. I've never pulled anything though. In all my years of stuff, I've never like
ice it.
I crawled to the car. Mom had to carry Matthias to the car. I crawled to the car. I drove because I could at least use my feet, and she held him because Ashley was leading a small group at the church. So I got in the house, and I woke him up. I was like, "You gotta walk, dude. Get out. We gotta walk." He's like, "All right." So he walks upstairs, and I laid there till last night. So for like almost 48 hours, I just sat on the couch, icing it. I have a buddy who's a doctor, like a physio doctor. So I text him. He shot me all these videos.
Did you call 700 Club?
It still hurt. Yeah. I've donated $20 for a quick heal.
Yeah,
I've
done that. I didn't get much. No. I got mad beef with them though. Like they like I will start cursing, like tempted to curse when I think about this. Like I called them. I called them a couple times, but I called them once actually.
I'm not supposed. Let me put this away. I don't want to give any bad. You know me. I try to be a good.
No, because I was dealing with some pain a few years back.
Don't do Red Bull, kids.
And I was seeking a miracle, so I called them, and I was like, I told them where my pain was at and stuff, and they prayed for me, but afterwards, like, because it took a lot to tell them like my pain, right? Yeah. Because you being transparent like that takes a lot. So, and they're a stranger, so you call them the prayer line, and they pray for you and stuff. And then right after they prayed for me, they were like, "Now, would you like to donate? $100 or $10 or whatever much?" And I was like, "You
no." And didn't it happen with a guy named Lenny Pinn? That's what his name rhymes with? Lenny Pinn.
Benny Hall. Benny Hinn.
Yeah.
No, let's not get into that one.
Okay.
That's actually a great story for future, but that's pretty entertaining. But yeah, I mean, that's I thought about it. No, but that's like, okay, if I was actually healed on the spot, then take my bank account. But like,
I don't know if
that was that's just.
Well, that was the problem. You didn't seal the prayer with a gift of faith. That was your problem.
Oh, that's why God didn't answer.
Yeah, you didn't pay.
It's true.
That's big. I've seen like a new resurgence about that. Like after for a couple years, it was like after Benny Hinn and all them, like it kind of lost its thunder, like paying for prayer or prophecy. But as of late, maybe just because the advent of a deeper social media, and TikTok
people aren't as gullible.
Like but I'm
society
seeing
isn't
it.
as gullible.
It definitely not, and it
more
fell
skeptical
off.
Society.
But I'm seeing more and more like it like getting a little bit of a resurgence. Not with Benny Hinn. I feel like he's changed his ministry and a couple other guys, but like there's these new prophets like our age. They're like in their 30s who are doing this stuff. There's a guy David Taylor. He's like in his 40s. There's another guy out in L.A., like an African guy who's kind of doing prophecies and stuff, and it's getting a little.
But you could only get away with it if you're really good looking and handsome. That's what
true.
I noticed.
That's true. So you and
Especially
I couldn't
nowadays.
do much of a living for that. My jeans aren't skinny enough. They do, right? They wear very pointy dress shoes. It's a prophet look dress code now. You got to have some type of Gucci jacket on.
Yeah. So you're
all right. Let's get started today. We got the A-team with us today, throwing us with some random video clips, random thoughts, random stuff, and I'm excited. Like I said, my son threw my back out, so I'll be going through some back pain through this, but I'm excited for today because it's been a few weeks. So let's go ahead. Gabe, what do you have for us today? Gabe, the director extraordinaire.
The first video today.
Where are you?
In general, is just titled the.
Show me your head.
Okay.
Show me the top of your head. There it is.
The first one's about whether we're in a simulation or not.
What? Whether we're in a simulation.
That's what it is.
Okay.
I think Elon believes that we could be living in a simulation. Do you ever think about that?
Well, that's an interesting idea, and it's being promoted by a philosopher at Oxford, actually, called Nick Bostrom. It's very hard to disprove.
Richard Dawkins, right?
Nick Bostrom thinks it's not only hard to disprove, he thinks it's highly likely. His version of that idea is that the simulation is not a different life form on another planet or something, but is our own future.
Right.
That our own
it's pumped to have this
future, which may be artificial intelligence, reaches the point where it makes a simulation of its own past, of the process that gave rise to it, including us, including the whole of evolution, and including us. And it is hard to disprove. I've even thought of a wrinkle on that. When I would pull out my phone to my 102-year-old mother just before she died, and would do things like ask Siri something, or show her a map of where she was born, or something she was. But how could all that information be in that tiny little thing? Well, it's not in it. It's in the cloud. It's probably in a computer in California or somewhere, and the information is brought into this little tiny thing in your pocket. If Nick Bostrom is right that we're living in a simulation, it is a bit of a baffling mystery how the human brain, this very small skull, can manage to do so much. I mean, when you think about what it can do, which computers can't do, maybe it gets its information from a cloud. If we're in a simulation, there's no reason why the information should all be inside there. It could be in the giant computer that's running the simulation.
Okay. This is good because Richard Dawkins is, number one, a lot of people may not know, he's like the foremost thinker, scientist, but also atheist.
Right.
So he's debated probably more Christian pastors and or apologists than any other philosopher or thinker. But he makes a few notions in this video. It's my first time seeing the video, but you and I have seen a lot of videos of Richard Dawkins in the past. One of the things that you'll notice about Richard Dawkins is he's ferociously anti-God. If you look at his stuff, I mean, just absolutely.
He's like an apostle of atheism.
Oh yeah, like he has an absolute disdain.
Like he has a mission.
Oh yeah, but
which makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Because if I'm an atheist, I care less what anybody believes. I'm just going to eat, drink, be merry, and get as much pleasure as possible before I die and check out.
But here's his thing. There's two big. This is the newest one because obviously Elon Musk, a few others, they've made simulation theory a big deal, which is the reality that right now this is not our reality. That it's Matrix. It's basically the Matrix.
Yeah.
Neo and everything like that. We are in the Matrix. We're living in a simulation.
Or Westworld. Or
any other thing. But
or a video game like that one game with Ryan Reynolds that just came out. Free guy.
Yeah. Which everyone loves to talk about it, right? Because the simulation theory is a big deal. So we make movies about what we're fascinated with. Ready Player One, all that stuff like that. Ready Player One would have been a precursor to the head towards simulation theory because it's still virtual reality or in real world. But here's the thing. Before this conversation, Richard Dawkins was always fascinated with the idea of intelligent design, that aliens, just like a Predator movie, if you watch any of the Predator movies, how I forget which is the one where the aliens come and then they plant the seeds and the genomes on Earth and then it multiplies and that's basically how it created us. You haven't seen that one? It starts with like a P.
Prometheus.
You know what, Jermaine? Prometheus. There we go. So the movie Prometheus, that teaches how we got here on Earth, right? Which is intelligent design theory. Is aliens, they took an amalgamation of them, an amalgamation of it, like an ape or an animal, and they put us together into genomes, and then they planted us here on Earth. Well, Richard Dawkins loves to have that theory. He loves to talk about it. You can look it up online. He loves the possibility that aliens came and put us on this planet and duplicated us, right?
Right.
Hates the idea that God created us, right?
Like, and he talks about it with anger and a frown on
disdain.
his face. This guy's talking about simulation, like,
and he has so much joy.
It's a possibility. It's like, bro, you're giving more credence to that theory than you are the existence of a God.
And he's saying it's irrefutable right now, simulation theory, like, which is crazy, you know. Elon,
and you can say the same thing about
too.
God, but he doesn't give credence to that line of argument, like, because you can't disprove God either.
And I got a thought. I'm going somewhere. So,
no,
it's not. It's not that profound, but I led up to it too much. But you're right. So, you know, his amazing thing is, so now because, you know, intelligent design is like, that's been the debate, you know, at this point since the Renaissance era. So they've been talking about, not God, but maybe aliens. So now you have Richard Dawkins, who've kind of seemingly moved past the idea of intelligent design and now says, well, let's just stop there. We don't even have, because if you believe we're in a simulation, you have to believe that there's something outside the simulation. So their theory is that we're thousands of years in progression already, and right now we're living in a matrix theory, like we're in a simulation.
Yeah.
And there's thousands of possibilities running all at once and stuff like that. But there is a higher society outside of ours that has placed us in the simulation,
Westworld.
Right? Just like Westworld, right?
Yeah.
So he's like totally.
You still need a programmer.
He won't talk about that though. Like, who then's the programmer, and where's those people, and what? But it's irrefutable, you know. Like, but what I love is like his end statement, which with a lot of scientists, it's all theory. That's what a thesis is, right? And then they work to prove their thesis. And right now, he still has a thesis. He's saying all working proofs that he's tried to disprove this theory are irrefutable. So he is leaning towards, I think there's a simulation. But then he says something incredibly profound where he says, what I imagine is we are so complex and our brains seemingly are so complex. What if we really aren't that complex and something is living in the cloud and it just gets downloaded to us? But if I go to talk to him about the proofs of the Bible and I say that God, by the power of his Spirit, downloaded this information to give us the Bible, that's just foolish. That's what he would say.
Same argument, though.
Exactly.
It's the same exact argument, but he wouldn't see it that way. But it is.
Because the collective consciousness of human history has affirmed a deity, number one, and then you have the collective consciousness of Christians and monotheists. So you would have to assume under his, if he ascribes to simulation theory.
Phone's off. Vibrate, silent, Phil.
I know, man. I was just about to freaking
feels like it wasn't me.
Win the Nobel Prize.
God was just thought,
bro.
The cloud.
I was about to create an original thought that no human being had ever come up with before, bro.
The cloud was downloading something right now, man. The cloud.
Anyways,
shaking my
gosh,
head.
what are you guys doing for lunch after today? So if he's ascribing to simulation theory, he would have to give credence to the fact that the belief in God is a part of the programmer's design, the simulation. So it must be important. And so why is that? Anyways, but the whole theory. Yeah. My biggest thing with Darwin.
I got issues with Darwin too.
With Dawkins. With Dawkins is like just the logical inconsistency with him, like the way he approaches this theory with like so much enthusiasm and like optimism and credence. You know, he'll never give that same energy to the possibility of a God. He's very angry towards that. And so the question is, why is that? Like, if God doesn't exist, why you get so angry about it? And why have you set it a life's mission to prove that God doesn't exist, and that you think the world would be more ethical if everybody believed that God doesn't exist? Because that's the main emphasis of his argument over the years, is that we need to stop believing in this foolishness called God in order to be a better humanity and become more moral and become more ethical. You know, that's his whole argument. And it's taken almost the form of a religious zeal and fervor because its basis is morality.
Yeah.
He thinks that not believing in God will make us more moral.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
good luck with that.
My biggest thing that I'm holding to his statement is that right now he has said simulation theory is disprovable. You cannot disprove it.
Right.
That to me is wild because he had, and I'm sure he has some answers, but he won't go deep into. But how do you reconcile now? How do you reconcile murder? How do you reconcile rape? How do you that was
It's
programmed?
meaningless.
That
Yeah.
was programmed in the simulation. That level of evil, that level of death and murder and decay. Like, you're just saying in the simulation they just give people cancer. They, you know, like, so he's saying it's disprovable, and then he's also saying, oh, we're getting thoughts from the cloud. Where, like, you know, Chelsea just said, is like it's circular at that point. You have admitted to everything that we believe in God, all the three major religions, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Like, we would all hear his statement and be like, he's talking about God. He's talking about downloading thoughts.
It's
He's
a
talking
metaphor.
about, you know,
It could be a good metaphor. Like
Yeah.
the whole simulation theory could be a good metaphor for describing maybe how God works in the world. How do you reconcile
Interacts
free
with us.
will and providence and divine ordination with free will? It's a good metaphor, but he's actually like talking about it like it's like
embraced,
the,
and we're
the
in it,
reality.
that we are
like
in
it's
it.
the
Yeah.
substance of reality.
Yeah.
In which case, it's just like, you know,
Yeah.
it's a fairy tale. Like
yeah.
like you make fun of Jesus and the Bible and Noah and the flood and all that, and you call it a fairy tale and you belittle it. But this thing that you're presenting is just as much of a fairy tale.
Yeah, yeah.
So, question:
You know.
where did the simulation theory like originate from? Where did it come from?
Well, the one who's popularizing it, you know, Dawkins said there's a professor in Oxford, but the one who has made it most famous as of late is Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the one, and it's been relatively in recent years that it's a greater conversation because as computers become more and more and more advanced, there's a recognition that as AI develops and as AI becomes more and more self-sufficient and self-thinking, that there's a potential possibility that we could already be so far advanced that we have created a network of possibilities and simulations that are untelling between the real world and the simulation. And so their thing is like, in theory, we potentially could be real people from a much more advanced stage that is simulating us in this progression that we have right now, with minor tweaks to reality to see where things go. And at the end of the day, someone could just pull the plug on it, and then we wake up in the real world, right? It's just like Matrix or anything
Right.
else, right? So all they're trying to do is reconcile with how technology is becoming more and more advanced and where it could go. But they're hypothesizing this ideal that really isn't any proof from. But my biggest thing is how excited they get around it and how they use language like Dawkins just did, which is it's disprovable to say we're in a simulation theory or not. It's actually pretty good argument we're in a simulation. Whereas the greatest argument of there being a creator, I mean, some of the best data that you can find is within creationism and within intelligent design vis-a-vis one creator. But the anger that they have and the rejection they have, but the giddiness and the jolly they have towards this theory. And it's hypocrisy, you know?
And it's based upon the atheistic presupposition that all we are is our brain.
Yeah.
Everything that we are is all synapses and chemical changes and fluctuations within the brain. And so, but the Christian argument against that is, we're body, soul, and spirit. We're so much more complex than just a brain. How do you explain conscience? How do you explain, how do you explain this this inward knowing of what love is, what hate is, and what good is, and what bad is, and what evil is? And under a simulation theory, there's really no reason to get upset about anything, because it's all just being controlled, simulated.
Yeah.
Why be hurt if somebody stole something from me? It's why why feel hurt if somebody punched me in the face? Or there is no right or wrong. How do you explain conscience? And how do you explain more complex aspects of humanity that you can't just boil down to chemical synapses in the brain? And,
which is leading them to a full circle moment. The more that Dawkins becomes more smarter and more advanced, it will actually lead him to God more and more. Like you would have never heard Dawkins 15 years ago even hypothesize the idea that there's a cloud that we get thoughts downloaded from us. He would have said, absolutely not. We're independent beings that advance and evolve on our own through process and error and through environment, right? Well, now he's engaging in a conversation that there's something outside of us that is being into us, like beaming or clouding in, and it's actually bringing him full circle. Like he's one nap away from realizing God exists. You know what I mean? Like he's one good dream away to just wake up and be like, you know what? Because in that conversation, 15 years ago, you never hear Dawkins. Even when he started exploring intelligent design, it was a big moment in the apologetics community because he was just so against all of that stuff. But then he went to believing in aliens, potentially, to now he's at a place where he is hypothesizing something bigger than us, a programmer that can bring us thoughts independent of our own brain. I mean, it's like you tell anyone who's a person of faith, they're like, oh yeah, God, you're calling him a programmer. Just like in Islam, they call God Allah in Arabic. It's like, in Hebrew, Yahweh, it's like, you're calling him a programmer now, but that's right. Who he is, Well,
I think he's following culture in a sense of like even the secular culture is becoming more spiritual. People are abandoning just atheism. If anything, people are saying they're agnostic. But atheism now is just no good fruit is coming from it. It's only bringing about destruction and heartache and depression and sadness. All the atheists in the world are depressed. They're lonely. So people are kind of abandoning that old, atheism of 20 years ago. Because they're realizing it doesn't do anybody any good.
And
to
they've
be
not
an
reconciled ethics, morality, and everything else.
Too many problems.
In 300 years.
Too many intellectual
problems.
Since
the 1700s, they've not been able to reconcile through the advancement of the intellectual age a lot of the things that we wrestle with. Where his answer, as of right now, would be, well, if we said, well, how do you reconcile ethics? How do you reconcile morality? He said, oh, well, it's programmed into us. Like, yeah, Romans chapter 2 said that 2,000 years ago. Like, boy, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's a great metaphor, right? Like you could really tailor it to be a good metaphor.
It really is, and that's the way he's coming up, because that's what you would say. If you asked him, why do we have ethics, then how do we know not to steal? 20 years ago, he would have said it's a social construct. But we would have said no, because if you go to another country or like a tribe and they murder as a social construct, you and I would try to teach them that that's not advancement. That's not the right way. So you are saying there's an ethical blockade. It's not a social strong construct. So they haven't been able, 20 years ago, they weren't able to reconcile that thought. Why is murder wrong? Why is stealing wrong?
Right.
Why? They would just say, oh, social construct, but not all social constructs adhere to those things that we all would say, right? So now they have a perfect out. It was programmed into us, which, that's our response too. Our response too, without the modern 2022 language, is we would say that God instilled it in us. Romans chapter 2. They're saying it was programmed to us. So they're not far off. The Dawkins is coming full circle around, just like, I don't know for sure, but the rumor is Darwin towards the end of his life is like, no, I think there's a creator, because I still can't reconcile a lot of these things that I theorized, right?
Believed in God, He believed there was a creator, Einstein.
So they're coming around, pray for Dawkins. Right. All right, Gabe, what you got?
This next one's men suicide.
What?
Men suicide.
Men suicide.
Yep.
Okay.
In 2019, men accounted for 80% of all suicide deaths in America. 80%. And the studies also show that a majority of American men who die by suicide have no known history of mental health problems because they don't talk about them. It's not that they don't have any mental health problems. They don't talk about them. And when they do try to talk about them, and like Jordan Peterson, listen to Jordan Peterson, subscribe to Jordan Peterson, or anybody else speaking out about these issues, they get attacked, they get featured in an Olivia Wilde movie as some sort of demon. So screw her. As somebody who was at the inception of the Me Too movement, I think I can say what those of us who were there at the beginning, and by the way, Olivia Wilde, you were not one of them, okay? You were not there. It was about just stopping men from making sexual favors at the office a condition of advancement. Everyone agrees with that. Men agree with that. Women agree with that. It was never meant to bastardize men writ large. That's what people like her are doing. And it's having a serious negative effect.
I'd be interested in Chelsea and Nancy's thoughts first on hearing that. Like, what's your guys'? It's my first time watching it too, but what's your guys' thoughts on? Because obviously we're men, so we probably have a different perception and outlook on how men are portrayed right now in society and portrayed right now in communities. Like, what's your guys' thoughts on her statement about men committing the most suicide right now and pressures on men? Like, do you think men have unrealistic pressures and expectations on them right now?
Well, for me, I mean, I'm not surprised that that number is 80%, as she said. I think communication-wise, there has been a perception of men not sharing because they don't want to seem weak or they don't want to seem, like vulnerable. But so I'm not surprised in that sense. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I don't know, Chelsea.
Yeah, I think she's partially right. What she didn't disclose was the age of men that were committing suicide. Was it younger? Was it older? I think that would help me have a more well-rounded answer. But I do think society, I think we're getting out of it more, but society has taught men to not have feelings. Not only that, to not express it. So they go on and live life not knowing how to do that. And I know that firsthand in like the dating world. It is like trying to talk to a child. It's like, do you know, how do you feel? Do you know how you feel? And it's genuinely, I think they do, but they don't know how to express it. And I do think society plays a huge role in it.
Yeah,
and sure.
And I think,
why are you laughing?
Go ahead. Why are you laughing?
Why are you laughing? What happened?
Well, because I think it's interesting. I think you're right. I mean, obviously your perception of dating. You guys are both single, right?
Very single. Very single. Yeah.
So just go on our website, find their social media.
Oh my goodness! I knew this was gonna come.
No, I'm just kidding. But
kidding.
you're going off your single stories, which I think are big. I think the question is number one, I'd ask you, how do you think, because you've talked about the guys you meet who are a little immature or don't understand, like, why do you think they're that way?
I wouldn't just go off of the men that I've dated or talked to. Even like my uncles and my dads would be put into that category of not knowing how to fully communicate their feelings or express it. And I think in conversation with my dad and my uncles growing up, that's just something that wasn't in the household. They didn't talk to their dads about their feelings. They didn't talk to their moms about their feelings. They're taught, you're a macho man, you suck up your tears and you go on, and you can't feel because you have to be the strong one for your family. So I don't think it was a thing that was discussed in the household.
Has the men in your family ever struggled with depression though? Or suicidal thoughts?
I
the
think
older men that you're referring to.
The older men? Yes, I do think they have. And it's not until they got older that they realized, oh, wow, this is depression, or this is what I was feeling. This is anxiety. It wasn't until they got older that then they recognized this is what I was wrestling with.
Well, let me ask this, because I feel like the men that you guys would date aren't having an issue like expressing their emotions and feelings. They're doing the exact opposite. They're too emotional and they're too embracing in their feelings.
Well, that's a good point. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Please don't do it again.
I got emotional for a second. Sorry. You hit a nerve.
I'm going.
I mean,
Because I'm going somewhere, right?
Okay, go.
No, but I mean, I'm going somewhere after I ask questions. I'm like, Jesus, I'm asking questions first.
Oh my goodness.
They're two.
Adam wants to counsel you.
I'm
right
not
now.
saying that they don't have emotion.
I don't.
I
No, the
think-
guy, not your. Hold on, because I'm going to separate. Not your dad or your uncles.
You talking
I'm
about the
saying
guys that I date.
you date
Okay.
that are in their 20s and below.
Yeah.
They don't know how to express their emotions. I'm not saying in a right way, but I'm saying, aren't they exhibiting over emotionalism? Don't they go too much into their emotion? Don't they go too much into their feelings?
The guys that I date, I would say no.
How so?
There's this 33-year-old dude that I dated. And in just conversation, he did not know how to communicate. Well, pretty much anything now that I think about it. So it's not just an emotional thing, but he had this issue with communicating anything that he was feeling internally. Anything. But then I also dated another dude who was overly emotional. I'm like, oh my, more emotional than me. so I think it depends.
Let me ask you, the guy who had all the emotions. Did he have an active father in his life?
He did not.
I was going to bring
He
that
did
point
not.
up.
Right.
He did not.
Yeah, I think we're getting into that.
Caleb
He
knows
did
where I'm
not.
going.
Into it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because here's my question. Here's my hypothesis. Because in
Okay.
today's age, over 45% of all young men are raised by their mothers. So,
Which is why you say they're overly emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
But-
we're giving like there's two different diagnoses that are being communicated right now in the
Yeah.
world, and the main one being being more emotional is the diagnosis to this depression. But there's also the other flip of the coin, which I think Adam is alluding to. Well, like when you see the older generations, you see the older culture of man, what it was like to be a masculine man, more of a stoicism. And so the question is, do you become more emotional as a man, or is more of a stoic demeanor of older generations that we've seen in older generations? Is that the ideal? What is the ideal man? Because I think the question is, are women just expecting us to be like women? Is that what's going on?
great
Because
question.
because women by nature are more emotional. Men are more logical. So I think men who aren't raised by a father figure are raised in a single mother home. They tend to take on the traits of the female, of the mother, and so they are more emotional. Where a man raised with a fatherly presence tends to be more reserved, more stoic, more logical. So is it a bad or a good thing? What's the ideal? Is it hurtful to demand that men become more emotional because you're telling them to do something that is
It's
not in their
not the
nature to
Yeah.
do?
For sure. I don't think there is. I'll speak for me, not all for all women, but it's not we want men more emotional or less. It's just, do you have the ability to communicate where you're at, whether it's more or less emotional. So I think that's where the gap is. The lack of being able
But
to
do
communicate.
you have the ability to communicate where you're at?
I'm getting better. But no, but I'm not 100%. No.
I understand that. I mean, yeah, but but there's this expression that men. So there's like Caleb just said, there's two ideological principles that I think young men are taught starting in their 20s, which is you have to have your life figured out. You have to be able to provide for a woman. You have to be able to be emotionally in tune. You have to be, and then the list goes on and on and on and on, right? And then for women, your expectations.
Do you feel like our expectations are too high?
No, I don't think your personal expectations are too. I don't know enough of what your
not
expectations
Chelsea's,
are.
but
women.
I think women's expectation of men, without the emphasis in our communities right now being in men taking their responsible role in society, because right now to be a man is demonized.
Yeah.
So to be a man with sexual thoughts is demonized. To be a man with expectations of what he wants in a relationship is demonized. There's been a lot of men over the years who have been misogynistic, who have taken advantage of, which that needs to be held accountable. And when you go in more and more religious constructs, that usually is held highly accountable in that sense, you know? So what I'm saying is that the reason why a lot of men, 80% of men, would either have suicidal thoughts or commit suicide is because there are pressures on them in the sense of what they're responsible for that are not necessarily on a woman in our culture and in our society.
But has that changed from the past, though? Is it different levels of responsibility from the past to where we are now? Or is it the same and it's just the lack of the father figure?
In the past, the man equally to the woman was appreciated, was adored, was loved, was idolized in healthy ways, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
In the same way that a mother, a wife, or a woman has been, right? But there's this common media and pop culture image of a man that says in order to build a woman up, we see it in Hollywood with movies right now, right? Some of our favorite movies back in the day feature women, like movies with Angelina Jolie and stuff like that. But in those movies, they never had to tear a man down to build a woman up.
Right.
But modern movies today, you watch any movie that has a strong female character, look at the male co-star. He's an idiot. He's dumb. Just look at all the latest Thor movies. When the Thor movies first came out in the late 2000s, man, Thor was the man. He was like, he was like a leader.
Women.
He was the leader of his country and his planet. He was someone that you would honor. And then you look at this latest one where Jane becomes him, and then he's a dummy who can't even fly. He runs into a rock. He can't even
He's a stereotypical bimbo.
Yeah.
What we used to think of as a dumb blonde bimbo.
That's
what they made
that's
Thor
now
into.
a man, right?
So they made women men and men women.
100%.
That's basically what's
and it's
going
like,
on.
And now they've called it equal. Like
well,
now it's equality.
So what do you think the agenda is? Do you think the agenda is trying
emasculate men?
That or equality?
No, because equality or equity,
like from Hollywood's perspective.
Oh, in their perspective, I think there's a conscious effort to disillusion men and their role in society.
To subvert. They're trying to subvert traditional values, traditional patriarchal values, Christian, just values in general, human nature. They're trying to, and not all of Hollywood, right? Not all of Hollywood, just in like these big blockbuster, in your face sort of movies. They're just trying to subvert. And that's what the devil does. He just subverts. He takes what's good and he just flips it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good is bad, bad is good now. Yep. And that's what you're seeing in the movies. Women are men, men are women. Right? It's like
yeah. But I think so. Like my thing is like I don't think anyone needs to go easier on men in any way. What I think we have to do is we have to be more conscious of what are the expectations of men and what is needed in our society and what's the fix to that, right?
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of things, and it all leads towards right now at least government policies and the sexual revolution. Those are the two things that have really deconstructed the nuclear family, the father and mother in the home, which you do any cultural analysis on what is most successful for a culture and a society to thrive, both economically and through reproduction. It's by having a healthy mother and a healthy father in the home. That's just facts on what is needed in a home to generally. So that's why I can hear someone like Chelsea explain to me the men that they're dating, and I could be like, okay, that man didn't have a father in his life, huh?
Yep.
Well, no. Like, so you can hear enough about where a man is at, and I can tell you whether they were in a divorced home, whether they were in a single mother home, because your attitude begins to enhance. I could tell you if you were part of a home like a Mexican machismo home where your dad never spoke to the family, he just came home and his plan in life was just, as long as I put food on your guys' table, everyone in the house leave me alone, everybody in the house shut up, everyone in the house let dad do whatever he wants on Saturday. I can tell by the children they raise what kind of home were they brought in, because that exhibits the character. So a lot of people right now, like Hollywood and all these other things, are trying to say, this is what men need. This is what men need to do. And without anyone saying, no, a young man needs a good father in his life.
Yeah, for sure.
He does need a father who's going to be in touch with his emotions in a healthy way. He does need to have a father that's going to be able to engage, but he also needs a father who's going to challenge him, a father who's going to discipline him, a father who's going to lead him, and a father who's going to engage in his life. And no one is offering those solutions. No one's saying, guys, there's an issue that 45% of all kids right now are fatherless. And why do we continue to encourage it? Well, because you get the best government support if you're a struggling mother. What if you were just a struggling family and mom and dad needed help? Nope, the single mother gets it.
Yeah.
And then the moment she finds a man, we pull that funding away from her.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's encouraged. It's encouraged to stay that way. It's encouraged to get abortions. Why? Because it's a dissolution of family. It's encouraged for men to not feel like they need to be involved in the woman's life or in the home. So our culture and our society is plaguing with these thoughts of suicide. That's why I think men are committing suicide, because they're being encouraged not to lead in their homes. They're being encouraged not to provide for their families. They're being encouraged not to raise their kids. And then women are over here just telling them how much they suck. So they're adding on top of that depression, where for a man, it's like, number one, the only way that I can fulfill my purpose is when I step into the role God's created me to, but no one wants me to do it. My government doesn't want me to do it. The people around me doesn't want me to do it. And then the only places that are singing this are places like in church, who are talking about the value of family. So now we in church, we're just like the aliens. Who are talking about being a family and being a nuclear family, being in a construct of father, mother, and those responsibilities. But by and large...
Well, specifically being in the church in the West, because most of the world doesn't buy into this junk.
No. Yeah. Well, the Western world, not just the West. You go to Europe, we're all the same.
Yeah.
The Western world, not
liberal
just
West.
Yeah.
You know,
but they're all having
go to
these
India,
issues, right?
go to China, go to Russia, go to the Middle East. They still have these traditional roles, these traditional values.
Yeah, 100%.
Men are men, women are women, boys are boys, girls are girls.
Yeah. And you raise them as such. And is it still an imperfect? Well, as long as we have sin, as long as we still have struggles, there's imperfection to it. But this ringing of the alarm that's happening to men, I just feel like the mark is being missed on where the solutions are. That's why for me, I'm very passionate around getting around young men who didn't have fathers, because I get it. I had a relationship with my father, and I had an investment from my father, and I get the value that comes from that. And it wasn't perfect by any means, My father landed in that Mexican category of work hard, just provide for your family, and invest. But so it wasn't perfect. But when I get around guys who haven't had active fathers in their life, I mean, it breaks my heart, because they don't know how to date, they don't know how to marry, and everything they've been taught is from their mother. But the thing is, to me, is if society is supposed to go towards feminism, why aren't there more and more good men? Why are there less good men? Because if half of all men are raised by their mothers right now, by single mothers, that means that there would be the opposite. There would be a growing move of men that know how to treat women.
No, you're right.
There's not. So I don't think feminism and overtly feminism.
Well, because you can't hack human nature. The key is to appreciate our God-given roles, appreciate women and the distinct roles and character traits that they have, and appreciate men and the distinct character traits that God made them to have. And to answer your question, do I have too much expectations? I think the problem comes when men expect wives, or men expect their women to act like men in certain regards, and when women expect men to act like them, to think like them. And I think once we realize how we're different, then
I was gonna ask,
and appreciate the differences, then we don't put those expectations on each other. You
sure.
value men for what they do and contribute to the world, and you equally value women for the unique role that they contribute to the house and to the greater society.
Yeah. With understanding there's like a cultural plague that's happening to and amongst our men, how do we not aid to women, aid to the already things that men are going through? How do we provide, not solution, but not push men deeper into this depressive state where they feel like they have no value.
Yeah.
But also have high expectation for a person that you want to be with.
So here's my short answer. And to me, didn't matter where someone would ask you, I'd still give the answers. Is first, a man has to be involved in his local church. He has to. I mean, it's the formulation. And currently in America, it's the formulation and the place where a man can begin to learn what a man's supposed to do. When you get into there's no other system outside in America where a man can learn where to be a man. So I think that is important. I wouldn't, if I was a woman looking for a man, not just a godly man, just a man, it would be a big deal for me what his involvement is in his local church and what he does in his church, because that to me is going to be a formulation of who he is as a man, right? Yep. That would be a big deal for me. So someone could be hearing this and they're like, he doesn't go to church or I don't go to church. I'd be like, y'all better start going to church.
Yeah,
because it is a proven place where you begin to get a systemic approach on who a man is and who a woman is. I think ideally as well in a practical
church,
level.
Though? There are a lot of effeminate churches out there. I mean, there are a lot of just churches that just have more, that aren't going to give you. So you can't just say like go to church because like what church? Like what are the what are the best churches that communicate that message that give that equal balance of feminine, masculine roles and traits and examples.
I'd say an easy way to partition it is go to a church that has programs independently for women and programs independently for men.
Okay.
Because a church that's effeminate, they're not going to have those. They're going to actually break those walls down. So if I just had to give just the most of all the 300,000 churches in America, I'd say, hey, that's a big precursor. If they have programs just for women and just for men, chances are they have a traditional view of gender roles in their church.
Like men's ministry, women's ministry.
Yeah, right. In some way or fashion where that's celebrated. Yeah. Again, I would ask them whether they're a church that goes, whether they go verse by verse or whatever, which is probably where it's headed down in the future, which we'll probably have to take a look on our church, like on our doctrinal values. We may have, I know we do it, we're moving it to our new members, our growth track, where we address gender identity and all these things like that. But it might be good, I think in the future, we're going to have churches that in their doctrinal belief, which we don't have that right now. We would have it in theory, but we wouldn't have it written. If you go to our website, is you're going to have to put what your belief is on the nuclear family. That's going to be big. We're moving towards putting it into our growth track, which is our new membership. But I think it'd be big for in the church in the future if churches put it immediately on their website, which in the future I'd say hopefully in 5 years from now, go on the church's website, see what their belief is on that.
Yeah.
Which and hopefully we can all move to that.
Yeah. To your point, Pastor Adam, about, males being involved in church. I mean, I can attest to that. Yeah, I did grow up in a Latino family. We're Guatemalan. But my dad, he grew up with a father who was an alcoholic. So he didn't have that example of a father figure. But when he came to the United States, he got involved in a church. And I grew up with a father who did show emotion, who did teach me what a man is supposed to be, not overly emotional, but to a point where I was like, oh, I've seen a man cry. I've seen a man cry in the presence of God. I've seen a man, so I think to your point, that is absolutely true. Like if a man, whether if you're a male and you're listening to this, if you don't have a father figure, that doesn't mean, hey, I'm in this category, like I'm bound to have these suicidal thoughts or go into depression. No, there is hope. There is a way where you can find that, example, in church.
One. Look for a mentor, look for an elder.
Which is pretty, I mean, people may say it's hard, but it's pretty easy to find once you start going to church enough and you get plugged in. That if you get, I got a lot of old heads in our church on Sunday that if I was struggling with a father figure, man, I have tons of choices of guys that I'd be able to, and I have them in my life. I've said it, like people like John Chappelle and others who were, even though I had a father, they were guys that I could call even when I feel like I couldn't talk to my dad. And they would wake me up, they would tell me what it meant to be a man in a true, authentic, good way. And I think lastly this, and you should share your thought, it's a little more controversial, but I wouldn't date a guy who had issues with his father until they were healed or reconciled. I would never date a guy who has issues with his dad. Never, even though I'm not dating a guy. I'm saying if I was in your shoes, now I think it's important. He should have an active father in his life. But if he didn't, single mother or whatever, if he's like, I hate my dad, or these emotions, that's what pulled the emotion out of him until he sought healing.
That's a good point.
Until he sought healing and reconciliation, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. That's going to be because it means he does not know how to be a dad and he does not know how to be a father, and he leads out of his pain. That's 100% going to happen. And so even in the church setting, for me, I don't mentor a guy until he is healed from his father. He doesn't have to be in restoration with the relationship because that's up to his father.
Right.
But he has to be at a place where he says, I'm at peace that my father wasn't in my life. I'm at peace that I have a heavenly father who's filled in that void. I'm at peace that I'm in my local church and I found a father figure in my life. Like, he has to get to that place. He has to go to counseling. He has to go to therapy. He has to get into his word enough that he can at least reconcile that part. Yeah. And then I would say we can move on to the next level of a relationship or anything like that in that sense.
That's good.
That's
well, I think I was going to say, as far as like the fatherless homes, this is why the Joe Rogans, the Jordan Petersons are so meaningful in our society today. Andrew Tate, because you have all of these men who grew up without a father and they're looking for father figures, and they find them on the internet and they speak wisdom and what a man is supposed to be, and they're drawn to that. They're naturally drawn to that. And so, Jordan Peterson has been, he's kind of the father to this lost boy generation. When you think of lost boys as the archetypal, just bunch of kids, just no parents, just running around. But like he's giving them guidance.
The kids that are thrown on the island.
I
forget that one.
I don't know.
What it's called?
Lord of the Flies. Yeah. So to me, like when I think like you can't hack human nature. When there's a vacuum, somebody's going to fill it. So there's been a vacuum of fatherlessness in homes. And so you have a Joe Rogan, you have a Jordan Peterson that come in to this vacuum, and men are drawn to them. They're drawn to that fatherly mentorship presence, and their lives are changed. How many men have overcome suicide by listening to Jordan Peterson? And it's funny you bring up like mentors we have at our church. Jordan Peterson to us is not bringing some groundbreaking truth. Like this is the stuff we grew up in. This is the stuff our dad preached to the men in our congregation for 30 years. Responsibility, discipline, start your own business, be responsible, be a man. Like so these are things like this is basics. Like this is not revolutionary. But somebody who grew up without a father in their home, raised by their mother, they listen to a Jordan Peterson say that. They listen to a Joe Rogan say, you need to work out. You need to work out. Stop sitting on your butt all day. Get out there, train, and
it's like
mind blowing.
Stop playing video games.
It's mind blowing.
Go get a job.
Like for us, it's basic. Like we got out of
our parents had us working at 16, 17. You were paid to run. I was paid to work at a store. Like,
but I appreciate, and this is the thing. Like, even though they're not Christian pastors and they're not theologians, like I see them as tremendous gifts of God given to this world, given to our specific society. I see the Joe Rogans, I see the Jordan Petersons, I see these masculine figures that are speaking genuine, solid truth and help to men, and I see them as incredible gifts of God. At this, at the same level as I would appreciate some great pastor or some, I think God sends these people into the world for such a time as this. And so, yeah.
You guys have any other thoughts or questions on that?
No, this is good stuff.
No, that was great. That was great.
Hopefully we'll find you guys
to church
good
tonight
men.
and looks for a man.
Oh, and one more thing. Let me add to that. This is important. This is important. This is so important. Because this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is that, you hear a lot about the Joshua generation from these preachers. So I think we're in Judges.
We agree on this. We talked
Judges.
about this.
I think I would preach a sermon series.
Can you
called,
explain what that means for
Yeah,
people
yeah.
who
No,
might not
he's
understand
going.
what
Okay,
the,
so
explain
the-
the Joshua.
you haven't heard it?
I know what it is,
Okay,
but not
okay,
everybody's
okay.
gonna know.
Yeah, so Joshua, it's like a cliche in the Christian world, right? Joshua generation, we're called to take the world for Christ and win
take
soul
land
and conquer for Christ, right? So we've heard that for decades, and so
which we don't disagree with.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Yeah, it's optimistic. It's great, wonderful. But
there's another side to this, though. But Caleb talk about all the time.
I would preach a series called The Judges Generation, because I think we're living in the Judges generation more so than some Joshua generation, in the sense that Judges is all about what society looks like when men no longer act as men in an emasculated culture. And what you have is you have women rising up, the JLs, the Deborahs, the Judges rising up to take their place because the men have become hedonistic, they've been selfish, like Samson, they're just thinking about getting laid. You have, the Gideons who are weak, who have no confidence. And so the book of Judges is all about the degeneration of a society when men give up their rightful roles as men. And so people ask, are you for women leaders? Are you for women teachers, women preachers, women leaders who are elected to political office? Some that I'm really liking in Europe that are being elected to political office that I would vote for and I would follow. And it's like, are you for that? I am in a Judges generation. I am for strong women. When there's not a man who can take that role, who's not man enough to stand on principle and to stand for truth, and a woman rises up to fill that role, I am all for that.
Yeah,
and so
because it's prophetic in nature. I mean, I see what's going on in the church space, and you have more and more women teaching and preaching, and you see it way more than you have in the past. And I've reconciled, same thing as Caleb, but independently on ourselves. We talked about this many times, but we both actually came to this conclusion independently of each other that I believe, you have so many more women teaching and preaching because in some sense, I think that when it happens, it should stir men to realize where we are falling short. I mean, that's what Deborah was meant to do.
Game.
There was not a man to, and if we just left this void where we have barely any men who are men, any men who are discipling, any men who are leading, right? If we just leave that void, you lose a generation.
For sure.
But if women go, well, I don't see no men doing it, which I think that's what's happening, whether they realize it or not. I think whether a woman realizes it or not, that's what's happening. They're going, well, if there ain't enough men doing it, and I mean by pop culture, I'm not saying in an independent, because somebody say, well, but in my church, we're seeing, okay, we're not just talking about your church. We're talking about 8 billion people in the world, right?
For
sure. We're talking about 330 million Americans, right? So of the 330 Americans, your pastor who's preaching on manhood, it's kind of a drop in the puddle of a lake, right? So you have women in a whole who are going, well, men aren't going to do it. We'll teach the Bible. We'll preach the Bible. And there's some people who are going, no, you can't. And to me, they're taking scripture out of context. To me, they are. But they're going, no, you can't, and this and this. And it's like, well, who's speaking on these things? Who's challenging these things? Who should make a man feel uncomfortable that they're not, that a woman would be telling you how to lead your home? Like that should make you feel uncomfortable. Say, hey, we need to rise up. We need to do our part in culture and society. So I think where we're living in right now is what you said is like, in a lot of ways, prophetic in nature. And I think there was an area 100 years ago when Amy Semple McPherson rose up, and you had a few others in her spectrum that were kind of challenging as Hollywood was growing and men were being emasculated as well. It's like I think that's where we're at, but it's loud right now. I mean, it's louder than in our cultural era. Like in Rome and in Greece, there have been moments where men were emasculated in that way, and you do have a lot of women in the church who made impact in those early days, but not in the way that we see it today. So I think it is big point to note that I 100% agree that it's more of a Judges generation, that as long as we as a culture, not independent, not just like, oh, their church, but as we as a cultural, and I believe the church can impact culture, but until we as a culture, but right now you have too many churches who disagree where are the issues and where are the fixes to the issues. Some believe it's in the political spectrum. Some believe it's in the partnering with your city. Some believe it's in certain programs. But until the churches say, okay, on Sunday, this is the emphasis, the nuclear family. This is the place where we broadcast our message of what this culture needs. Until we as a culture do that, I think we're maintaining the Judge's generation right now. It's just, that's what it's going to be for the foreseeable future. Right. You know, I'm sick of dealing with young men who don't know how to be men. But I don't think it's their fault. At the same time, I'm not going, I'm so sick of you guys. Yeah. I'm saying I'm sick of culture and society and even the church developing these delicate men. These emotional men.
Men in the past didn't have the luxury of not being men, or even have the luxury of being depressed and suicidal. They had to survive. You didn't live beyond the week if you weren't a man who worked and who provided and who put aside his depression and just got to work because you had to freaking grow those potatoes. You know, and so I think this
and at the same time, not to let anyone else on the hook too, and to the same time, until women maintain what it means to be a woman.
Yeah,
there is way too many. There's just way too many get out of jail free cards right now.
Right,
that's part of our issue in society. Right, you got Plan B pills, you have abortions, you have next day. Right now in California, they're trying to pass a bill that up till even weeks after the baby's born, if you still have regret, you can get rid of the baby. Wow. I mean, they are saying to a woman, there is literally no recompense, anything that'll happen to you. If you could do whatever you want with your body, you could do whatever you want with your life. But for a man, should she decide to keep it, oh, buddy, half your check is going to go to her. It's not your decision, right? So, yeah, men are going through it, but even women, they are going through their own mental health crisis, bearing the weight of decisions that are made within these things. So both parties are responsible. Both sides are responsible of this decay that we're seeing. It's just men are getting the biggest front because also men are the ones that you can point physical blame to of what's happened in like Hollywood and other areas, even in Christian churches where there's sexual assault cases and stuff like that, which is just grotesque things. Right. But that's why it's easier to go, oh guys, it's on you guys, because there's enough stories of where they have done these things. So you can theoretically put most of the blame on them. But it's not just the case. It's us as a culture, society, when it comes to womanhood and manhood that is really disenfranchised right now. And it's bleeding into the church.
And I think one of the big benefits of the church, especially for men, is to go to a church that gives you responsibility and tasks and assignments. That gives you vested interest in that church. That challenges you. Because that's what men want. That's what we need to know. Why am I here? What is the purpose of me being here? And for women looking for a man, look for a man who has some element of his life in service to the community, in service in some way, apart from his job, apart from his 9 to 5, some charitable deed, something where he's getting outside of himself and focused on others. I think that's another key trait.
I think you're on the money on that. Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, we could go. I mean, this is, we talk about this stuff all the time. So we go hours and hours on this one. We'll hit one more, and I'm sure this is what we do. We're gonna bring back this conversation more and more in the future.
For sure.
Oh yeah. There's a lot more you can go into. I mean, it's all really good stuff, but hopefully it helps somebody. Let's go ahead. What you got next for me, Gabe? Let's do one more.
Work over family.
Oh,
I've been watching my daughter's life on like a phone, and it's a little like, wow, this is crazy sample. It's a little like, what am I doing? Like, she's never going to be 6 again, and I miss like tons of her life, and I'm just like, yeah, I make this money, but I'm like, I watched my kid's life through a FaceTime. And I'm the only dad that has been in a swimming tour. And it just killed me.
I've actually seen this video before, and I don't always send videos to the team. I did send this one. which Corey, I know he orchestrated it after this manhood
You're right.
conversation.
I guess that's why it's so funny.
Yeah, right.
Men are overly emotional, and then we watch.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But I saw this clip like a month ago, and I was so fascinated with the fact that he was because it's a comedian's podcast. So I was so fascinated with the fact that they both were crying and breaking down that I went back and watched the podcast, at least 30 minutes of it, to get this context of why they were crying. And basically it was because the younger one, he's blowing up right now as a comedian, and so he's never home. And he's come to a reconciliation. He's missing his kids' lives passed before him. So he just randomly kind of starts crying as they're talking about it. And then the older one, who's very successful comedian that many people know of, he's basically saying, I mean, I did that. Like, I made that mistake. And I did work past my kid's life, and I did miss a lot of it. Yeah. So they both hit this moment of reconciliation of how hard do you work versus how hard do you how present are you as a father, but I'd say even as a mother, how hard do you work to the balance of family? And so they have this moment where they're crying, but I've been there before. I mean, and I still balance it all the time. My wife has to help me balance it, but I've been very successful over the years. I've been very successful in the area of tech. I've been very successful in the area of marketing while also being a pastor. And there have been seasons of my life where, and even like right now, I've been gone for like 3 weeks, just either at another church or in working on tech stuff or a board meeting for this thing. And you start to and I tried to make it. One thing I told my wife was, because you and I kind of grew up in a home, our dad was a pastor, but he built something very, very big. He built a church of 12,000. And in order to do that, something has to be sacrificed in order to do that. And so sometimes I'll jokingly say to people, and in some ways I'm joking, some ways I'm half serious, they'll say, what was it like having Pastor Diego as your father growing up? And I'd always respond and say, you would know better than I would. Because I mean, he was raising all y'all in the church. He was, he was pretty. I mean, my mom really raised us, and my dad's been open about that. He's preached about how I might not have been a great father, but I will be a great grandfather. Like, he recognized how hard he worked. And it's conversations me and my dad have all the time, because I kind of have his same work ethic in that way. And he's always like, man, don't make the same mistake that I did. Like however you're defining success, whether it's money or size or people or vacations or whatever it is that you're at, he's like, don't make that mistake I have. So I made a promise to my wife when I married her and we started having kids was I may not be able to be that present outside of our immediate family, but one thing I will promise you is I will be 100% engaged in you and our kids. I don't know that I can go outside of that. I don't know that I can go to your family or my family, the exterior things.
Right.
But what I am going to make a promise is for you and these kids. Like, I'm going to do everything I can. So one day I was traveling and flying and everything. My son had soccer practice and I rolled up to that thing just dead tired. But I was like, I'm here. I'm here to watch him practice. Because I think as a man, that's where, or depending on what the structure is, could be a woman. But I think a lot of times for a man, that weight to have to provide for your family while also being present, I think that's why a lot of men struggle with sharing their emotions. I think that's a lot of reasons why potentially your grandfather turned to alcoholism and stuff like that, is because how do you reconcile with these emotions? How do you reconcile with having to, and for some people, they're literally working as hard as they can just to make ends meet. Oh yeah. So it's like, where do they reconcile with it? To be engaging with your kids takes work. I mean, it's tiring. Absolutely. It's not, I tell people all the time, it's a joy to raise my kids, but it's a painful joy because it's tiring. Like, being present for your kids. Yeah. When you've had a tough day or when you just want to lose it, it's hard. So when I saw that video of them, I felt that, because not only did I feel like I've been in that situation before, but also looking backwards, you can see how some men could watch that and say, man, I wasn't there for my kids. Yeah.
And I think this is unique to kind of millennial young fathers, is that we're kind of learning from our boomer fathers, because it was kind of that was just the boomer kind of atmosphere, like just like you're more focused on your work than you are your kids. Like there wasn't meaningful conversation, meaningful attention. I mean, you kind of that was kind of that generation. It was just kind of like you said, it was just like, I'm putting the food on the table.
I'd go to my one lazy boy couch. No one talked to me.
Yeah,
no one bothered me.
Yeah. So I think millennial fathers are really, they seem to be more in tune with their children, having more meaningful relationships with their children, more meaningful conversations, and so that's good. I see that as kind of an improvement. I've noticed that. I don't know if I've noticed it. I don't know if that's just me or if that's a reality. It's really going on. But it does seem like that the older generation, they was more hands off.
Yeah. Well, I think, and in our context, American culture, it was basically taught work, get your 401k or get your retirement, and then you can enjoy on the later end of your life. And I think a lot of millennials are seeing within our parents that was kind of a lie, that we see their health decaying. Right now there's going to be over $1 trillion of money that's going to be passed on to millennials from boomers, because they had all this money and they don't have enough places to spend it. They don't have enough places to go because they're tired, they're sick, they're all these things. So I think a lot of our generation is kind of looking at it and going, oh, this is kind of catch-22. Work. And by the time I'm 60, but when you're 60, you can't walk up a flight of stairs. You can't, it's like you've already had too much McDonald's.
And
you've
then
already this and that.
And we don't have a retirement to look forward to the way the economy is. So we don't. We're looking at working every day of our life until we
until you die
6 feet under.
You go you go home to be with the Lord. So I think there's this recognition and also this missed opportunity of like, well, this is what I would have loved for my parents. So this is what I want. So there is much more of a balance of recognizing work and hard work, and then also being present for the family. But then there's the flip side to say, but if you do that, you are sacrificing something because of how expensive it is to live right now.
Right.
Like for someone of a boomer generation, they were able to have a really good house by 30, like a nice house that you were like, okay, our kids are going to go to junior high here. They're going to go to high school here. Like today, people are getting their first house at 35, getting into a permanent house by 50. You're already on the tail end of retirement. You're already an empty nester. You didn't even need all that.
More renters.
So it's a tough catch-22 to say, I'm not going to work as hard. It's harder now because then you're not going to be able to have as much as the previous generation had in that sense in terms of a comfortable living.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
So
it's
we're having to focus more on relationships.
Yeah.
Because we know that we're not going to have nice things.
We
know that we're not going to get that big house and own it and retire at 60 and golf, and that's probably not going to be the majority of us. So it's like, well, what's really important then? It's our relationships, it's our children, it's our friends, it's our family, it's our parents, it's our, and so making those more meaningful.
I think additionally, I'm trying to figure out, this is me talking out loud, so I think part of the difficulty is how our education system for our kids builds this mandated education system where they have to be there Monday through Friday. They have to go from X amount of time. If they miss, they own this, because like I'm watching these guys and I'm like, well, you guys are pretty successful. Why can't you take your family with you on these things? Because he's talking about how gone she is and everything, and she's doing swim.
That's a good point.
But part of their responsibility, she can't miss school and she can't miss this. And I'm like, well, how have we prioritized education, like doing math and all these other things over what the family can do together and what the family can learn together and where the family can go together? Because that's one of my thoughts. Like I talk to my wife all the time about, there's going to be an age where my boys get old enough, they're going to be in school, but I'm still going to be traveling. I'm still going to be working. I want to figure out in their curriculum, how can I take them with me and commit a day or two towards their education?
Yeah.
But the education system would naturally be like, no, you can't do that. If you're going to do that, you have to pick homeschooling or charter schooling. And so I think what kind of can disrupt a family investment or a family affair. And I know Phil's amening to this in the back over there because he has all his kids in elementary school and he knows how difficult it is, like just to pull his kids out for a day, you know, and how they look at you like you're an ungodly parent for pulling your kid out of school, you know, where you're like, man, I want to take them to Disneyland. I want them to have a family day. I want to have, you know, and I don't have weekends off. I'm a pastor. I work weekends. Saturday and Sunday are my work days. I'm off Monday, Tuesday. So if my kids go to school Monday, Tuesday, how do you balance that?
I also want to bring like perspective too, from a historical perspective too. I remember having a conversation with a pastor when I was thinking about becoming a Navy chaplain. And I had a conversation with this guy. I was like, what's it like? You know, you're gone potentially 6 months to a year away from your wives, your children. And he was like, you know, it just is what it is. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the job. But you have to think about it throughout history. Men and fathers have always had seasons in which they're away from their families for extended periods of time. It's only in our modern age do we, you know, pretty much see them every day, every week for our entire lives. But in the past, you would go off to war, you'd be gone for 2 years, or you'd go on a trip to in Bible times, you go to Bethlehem to do a census or something. I mean, you travel and you're gone for months, weeks on end. And so I just don't want to get the impression that like it's not entirely unhealthy and unnatural to miss some things in your kids' lives. That's pretty normal throughout human history. I think it's just when it becomes a consistent thing where you're always gone from their games. They don't have any memories of you in going to Disneyland or going on vacations.
But I think that's what it is. I mean, between them, but also a lot of other American contexts, that I think that is the case.
What's that?
The father being absent. I think that's very, or just in general, like the lack of investment from the family nowadays. Like I think that's very common. I think it's common you're.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always common. I think, you know, you're always going to have bad fathers. You're always going to have neglectful fathers. I think I'm just thinking about, well, what's the ideal? Like, should we beat ourselves up because we miss a few games or a significant event if we're off doing our career that's able to bring home and pay the bills and feed that kid so that they can have the ability to eat, to have a roof over his head, to go to a game with his mom. I mean, obviously I'm not against like entirely not neglecting it as a father.
But in this context, so if you watch this full podcast, he said he went to his daughter and he said I could do a show this weekend and I could afford to get you, and he showed her like something she'd really been wanting. He said, I could go to a show this weekend and I can get you this, or I could not do the show, but that means daddy doesn't have enough money to get you this. Right. And his daughter's response was, I would rather me just be able to spend time with you, Dad. You know, it's like, I think if your kid can articulate that, then that it's a hard problem of the weight. And that's what I'm talking about for most people who have to really provide for their family or want success, like extreme success, it's going to come at the altar of something. And I think that's where the balance is. I'm not talking about just a regular area of life where you're kind of just working a 9 to 5 and you're present after 5 o'clock. I'm talking about you have a lot of goals for your family. You have a lot of goals for your lifestyle. You have a lot of goals for your future, that there is great sacrifice that has to occur and it has to be calculated. And that's what he's doing. He's doing a recalculation of how successful does he want to come at the bedrock of his family. And so he's coming to the realization, I would actually much rather dial down my success, dial down my financial future so that my daughter can get me for her birthday, because he was going to miss her birthday, so that she can get me on some of her, because he said, I haven't been able to make it to one swim meet her whole season. Okay. And so that's where I'm talking about. When it becomes consistent. Yeah,
I agree with that. I agree with that. And that's why I say, like, I think our millennial generation is more mindful of it, which is a good thing. And I think we're learning from our dads and their dads' lack of attention that they gave to us.
But that is one of the things we could close it down after that. That's one of the things I do talk to my wife all the time is what do you want from life, and what do you want for our future, because that'll dictate how much I have to work and how much I have to do.
Right.
And us coming to a consensus. Us coming to a consensus of what we want from life, because she'll sometimes see a big house and be like, or she'll show me a house on Zillow and be like, I love this house, and I'll be like, one day I could get you that house, but here's what it would take. You know, like, well, no, I don't want that. Okay, well, and that's the weight of communication between men and women, because I feel like sometimes I can only speak as a man, because I only know mostly men. I don't spend a lot of time with women outside of those who hang out with my wife. So when I talk to men who are married and have kids, sometimes it's like they'll express like, man, I feel like my wife wants this. I feel like she wants that. I feel like she wants the world. I feel like she wants this. And then, but she also wants me to be at all of my in-laws' birthday parties, and she also wants me to be at all of our kids' games, and she also wants me. It's like you want, which is the millennial thing, right? Like in the past, the husband or whoever else, the provider, would have just, and the mom would take care of it, right? But since there's much more of this equality balance, which I'm cool with, I don't have anything against it. It's like, and I've talked to my wife with that, like, hey, listen, if I'm doing majority of the providing, but then there's this weight on me to get down to here and this, like that's going to hurt me over time. And so it's communicating what do we want for our life? What do we want for our future? And at what level do we want to sacrifice? What do we want to sacrifice? Do we want to sacrifice our kids' games? Do we want to sacrifice a better home? Do we want to sacrifice a better car? Or whatever it is, but something always ends at the bedrock of sacrifice. Something's always at an altar if you want a successful thing, right? So if you want something successful, you want something to expand, you have to just be on the same page with your spouse, or which is your future of what is it going to take. Yeah. And that's what I related to in this video, because something I'm talking about all the time. With my wife.
That's a good problem to be
feeling.
That's a good way emotion to have right there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, good show today. Had some good conversations. We will see everybody next week.
That went by
God bless y'all.
fast.
I know.
Wow. What was that?